Hi guys, my name's EAHamm. Welcome to my channel. I write poetry, I write novels, fiction, young adult fiction is one of my favorites, and nonfiction, self-help blogging. There's just so much that I do. But if you're just joining my channel, I just started just recently, and I love to offer tips and to teach you or help you along your writing journey. So today I am starting a segment called Having Coffee with Liz, or Coffee Time with Liz, whatever you want to call it, because I love coffee. The whole purpose of this is for me to be a little bit more laid back and not teachy or whatever, and I can answer some of your questions if you have any, as well as tell you a little bit about my writing history and writing process, which is completely different from my teaching videos. So if you like this content, or if it's something that interests you, just go ahead and click subscribe, like, and then comment in the boxes below. Like I said, if you have any questions, I am more than willing to answer them in a later video. So let's get started. What I wanted to talk about today was basically my writing journey and what led me into writing and so forth. Around the age of 11 is when I started. I was going through a phase. We had just moved from where I grew up all my life, and so I was feeling a bit lonely or nostalgic, and along with that came in English class learning how to write poetry. And well, with the poetry, I thought, I can do this. This is something I can do. So I sat down, and I remember penning my first poem ever. And I remember it was really easy for me to do. I was, I guess I was shocked, this is easy, I can do this. And I remember running out to my parents and reading it for them. Well, they were blown away. And in my 11-year-old mind, I was like, wow, I really impressed Dad and Mom. But here to find out, they really were blown away. It wasn't just one of those things where, I'm proud of my kid, whatever they do, like, oh, Mommy loves this or whatever. No, they actually loved it. And throughout the course of the next several years, there was this poetry contest. I'm not remembering what it was called, but it was for a poetry book that was going to be published in the Library of Congress. And I wrote a poem about our national bird, the bald eagle. And I remember a couple lines from that poem, oddly enough, because I think that I actually quoted that in class one day. It went something like, "Great bald eagle in the sky, with a shrill and piercing cry, do you know that God made you and that you're almost extinct too?" So it was kind of, one of those rhyming poems, but I was chosen to be published in this book for the Library of Congress. And then later on, in my earlier 20s, I wrote a poem about 9/11 because, when something happens in our world and country, even to this day, usually how I process is to sit down and write poetry. And that poem also was chosen and published to be published in that book in Library of Congress. Now, for the first part of my writing journey, or part of my life, mainly I wrote rhyming poetry as well as journaled. I loved journals. I loved to make my own journals. There was somebody that I knew in my school. She was very artistic, and she taught a bunch of us girls how to make these journals. And my favorite thing to do would be to go to the bookmobile. Yes, we had a bookmobile come to our small town every other Wednesday, and it was like a traveling library. So I would go and I would get these big stacks of books. And I'd check out as many books as they allow you on your card. So I would take a book, and I would take my journal and my pen, and I would write. I would read, and write. And quite often my parents didn't know where I was, but eventually they found some of my hiding spots. They'd be like, "Oh, where's Elizabeth? Oh, she's, writing, leave her alone." And that was the majority of from all through high school, when I was going through a rough time, break up with a boyfriend, or, drama with girlfriends, friends. And it was my journal and my book. And then later on, like when I was 16, 17, I played the piano. So it wasn't until probably when I reached college level, I took sophomore English, and I thought, I got this in the bag, and I thought that I was like a phenomenal writer because I love to use my adjectives and my adverbs. I mean, and I love to be very descriptive. And I thought, this is going to be an easy class. I look forward to this class. My teacher, she had a way of bringing me down a few levels, but you know what? To this day, I learned, there's a time for adding your adjectives, and there's a time for being way too wordy, but then there's also a better way of putting things. And through the process of that semester, I was taken down a few pegs, and I actually learned, how to write. She would give us subjects, and I would gung-ho, I'm going to pass this one, and I'd get a C, and I wasn't a C student, so that was kind of devastating to me, especially a blow in my heart because, I'm a writer, I know. But you know what? We all have something to learn. And to this day, I'm still learning. I don't claim to know all the answers. Yes, I graduated with my major in English, and my minor was music, and I could tell you how to stand here and teach you how to diagram a sentence, and I can tell you how to pick apart a sentence and find the verb and the adjectives and the other adverbs and all that. I could tell you, about spelling and how to write grammatically correct and all that, but there's still stuff that I don't know to this day, and I'll tell you, I don't know, but I will find out. I'm constantly learning, and as a writer, I believe that you understand this as well. You're constantly learning. But all that to say, I would write stories. I remember writing one when I was about 12 or 13. I read this one book series. It was called the Mandy series, Lois Gladys Leopard. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she wrote young adult fiction, and it was basically kind of Christian fiction. It was about a young girl who lived in, I believe it was Asheville, North Carolina, and she was actually, her father had died, and he had lived near an Indian reservation, the Cherokee Indian, and when her father died, she was given to her grandmother to raise, right? And this whole series talks about the mischief that she gets into, how she meets her mother, how it was for this girl to be sent away to boarding school. Miss Prudence and Miss Hope, I believe, were the matrons or whatever, the big head teachers of the school, and she meets her best friend Celia. I don't want to bore you with all the facts, but I remember that was really big for me when I was about 12, 13, 14 years old. And that's what my parents would get me for birthdays and Christmas and stuff. They knew exactly what to get me, the next book or the next 5 books in that series. Well, I decided I was going to, well, at the time it was pencil a story similar to that. And I put my whole heart and soul into it. I picked a different name. It was in that setting, but like I picked just different. I tweaked it. It was like fan fiction for that, but I chose different characters, and I finished it, and I don't remember how many chapters I had. There might have been 7 or 8, maybe 10 at the most. And a friend of mine's mom was an editor for a newspaper, and I gave it to her because I was so proud. I gave it to her, and she read it, and she got back to me. And she said, "This is cute, Elizabeth. Don't ever give up on writing." I was like, "Do you think that this could ever be a book?" I mean, I was serious at that age. that's what I wanted to do, was to write a book. And she was like, it has potential, but you're kind of dramatic, Elizabeth. You over dramatize these scenes. Like, nobody acts this way, or, you know. And she just went on to tell me, and I don't think I heard much after, you're over dramatic, Elizabeth. And at that age, you know, I took it really hard. And I have to say, even as a writer, I'm sure you can agree with me. As a writer, when you get critiqued, it kind of hits your ego. You're like, well, this is how I wanted to write it, you know? Or, you know, you just like, well, this is why I did this. I don't care if you don't like it. But you know what? You got to take a step back. And there's a such thing as learning to take the good with the bad. Of course, it feels great to hear that you've helped me, or, you know, you're phenomenal. You know, I look up to you, I aspire to you. Of course, that feels good. Of course, anyone would love to hear stuff like that. But along with it comes the, oh, who do you think you are? Or you're just too dramatic. Or like, I had someone read, let's just say, after someone close to me passed away, I sat down and I penned 50,000 words. That's all it was. 50,000 words, 30 chapters, or almost 30 chapters of a story of someone who lost somebody. And I started the prologue off, and it was dramatic. It started off in a grief, the setting was a grief group. Well, I gave it to someone to read, and the very first thing they said was, if I walked into Barnes & Noble and I picked this up off the shelf and I read this prologue here, you lost a sale. You're too dramatic. And I was kind of put off from that. But you know what? Not everyone has the same tastes. I soon learned that I was asking someone who actually likes to read and write science fiction to read my drama. And if you're not used to reading someone's work, you know, in that particular genre, then of course you're going to have a different opinion. You want someone to read your stuff who is in that genre. So like I said, I don't know everything. Anyways, where was I? I was talking about my poetry and my journey with that. But before I end this video, I've been rambling on and on. I had someone ask me if I plan on publishing a novel other than my poetry, and my answer to that is yes, I do. Actually, I have been working on this one manuscript now since 2012, off and on. And the first time I wrote it, it was so hard because I couldn't imagine even penning 50,000 words. And then I made it. I made the 50,000 words, but I knew that there were holes in it, right? And I knew that it wasn't long enough. At that time, I learned that that was probably the length of a novella. But I wanted to do a novel, so I needed to get 100,000 words. And I was like, there's no way on this planet I'm going to get 100,000 words. So I tried rewriting it. And actually, I made the mistake recently. Well, it was probably last year, towards the end of the year, of giving my manuscript to someone I knew. And because I knew them, I think that my feelings were kind of hurt. And they were taking me really literally. They, you know, it was good, constructive criticism, but I think the best thing to do is to, when you go to find a beta reader, is to find someone that you have no emotional ties to. It could be an objective thing, and that will help you. So I was really discouraged. So then all of a sudden I start beginning to get all these ideas start hitting me at once for this novel. It was historical fiction, and then I thought, you know what, I'm just not into historical fiction anymore, but I like the era, right? And I had this other story that I had started, and it had to do with kind of like sci-fi type thing. And I was starting to write the historical fiction again, and I had a friend of mine read it, and she said, did you ever think of writing for young adults? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I have these particular characters, it's like 18 or 19. She's like, make them a little younger, young adults. And I was like, I don't know. She goes, I can see this on a young adult shelf, I promise you. And within the last year, I also have started to love the horror or the thriller type material of Stephen King. So I know this sounds kind of crazy, but I'm going to combine all of my ideas, and I plan on starting that here very, very soon. After Camp NaNoWriMo, after I finish, with my poetry and send that off to beta readers, I do plan on publishing a novel. So that will probably be it for my coffee. My Gettysburg cup I got when I was in Gettysburg. I don't know if you can see it. It says Gettysburg on it, but I want to do one of these every week. If you have questions, like I said, just put them in the comments below and I'll answer them during coffee time. And you can grab a cup of coffee and listen to me answer them. Like I said, my name's EAHamm, and I post writing tips as well as real talk, if you want to call it that, with writing, just it'll be a variety of things. And if that interests you, just click subscribe and click like, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.